Welcome back. This is GBS Morning Extra. My name is Timothy Omondi. If you're just joining us, you can follow us on Twitter. That's hashtag GBS Morning Extra. You can also get to watch this very episode on Facebook and on YouTube. As I promised earlier, today with us in studio is a very special guest. Today we are discussing matters housing and two main issues that we're discussing in regard to housing. We are talking about the use of environmentally friendly building materials, of course, a big concern today, not just in Kenya, but globally. And also we are going to look at the affordability of this housing. As recent reports have actually showed that Africa needs at least $1 trillion to plug in the African housing sector. But this notwithstanding, there still lies a big challenge, as many of the contractors or developers are only focused on high-end markets. But that, with us today in studio is Geoffrey Kilonzo, the General Manager of Urithi Housing Corporation Limited, who is also going to help us discuss more and understand this industry better and what the industry is doing in regard to the two matters. If you don't know about Urithi Housing provides affordable quality housing and land at a subsidized cost for until over 28,000 registered members, and we're going to listen about that more. Bwana Kilonzo, karibu kwa studio.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yep.
Now, thank you again for honoring our invitation. The issue of housing is indeed a very big issue.
Yeah, indeed.
As we can tell by what the government, some of the key or priorities that the government is setting among the big four agenda, we have affordable housing by the president, whereas the government itself is also trying to see to it that it also contributes, not just leave the whole sector or the whole burden to the private sector, who is, of course, has the lion's share in terms of development. But then the government is also trying to chip in to see to it that Kenyans get affordable housing. Yeah. As Urithi, the housing corporation, what is your mandate? Maybe you can just start by telling us that before we go into the main discussion.
All right. Thank you. And as you said, I'm Geoffrey Kilonzo. I'm the General Manager of Urithi Housing Cooperative. And basically, we are principal providers of affordable housing, across the country. And we want to go beyond. And not just affordable housing, but also affordable housing solutions.
All right.
Because you go beyond the house, there are other solutions that you provide. And when you're providing a piece of land, it's a solution towards home ownership. When you're providing an investment package, then it's a boost towards home ownership. Right. So basically, we provide affordable housing solutions. And that's what we've been doing for the last 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, let's go straight into this. The demand for housing indeed is growing in Kenya.
Yep.
But now, as I introduced earlier, and there's a global report that shows that there is still need to invest more in housing, and not just affordable housing. But the issue here is that in countries like Kenya, still not many developers have packages like what you mentioned for the, I would say, average Kenyan who would want to own a home. And recently we've had a huge debate on the government's way of trying to get people to actually contribute towards owning a home in the future. Maybe you can just paint a scenario of what the Kenyan market today is like to our viewer.
Awesome. First, it's important to know that the journey of home ownership in Kenya has been a long one and not easy. And not just in Kenya, in Africa. Because there's so much talk of affordable housing, but very little being done. And even the government support, it's coming, yes, but we're seeing it very slow. And the question is, are we going to get there? We have a deficit of over 200,000 housing units.
200,000.
200,000 housing units per year. We've been able to supply, all to put together all the developers around 50,000 per year, you know. So if there is, the demand is 200,000, the deficit is, you know, around 150,000 when you have a supply of 50,000. Now, if the government has promised to support, the question is, in which area of support?
All right.
You know, those are good questions to ask ourselves. The other thing is, what is left for the private sector?
Yes.
Because again, there has been so many challenges with the private sector trying to offer affordable housing.
Yes.
One, because again, the scanning of the demand may also not be real. Because when you talk about affordability, it is not on the supply side. When you talk about the housing supply, housing provision is not on the supply side also, also on the demand side.
All right.
When you talk about the demand side, is the buyer. The supply side is a developer.
All right.
So Urithi Housing may be able to offer so many houses, but do we have the buyers?
Sure. That's the biggest question.
That's the biggest question. And then the question is, what informs the availability of the buyer? The availability of the buyer is in the buying power of the Kenyan. And so even when we talk about supplying 5,000 units, you know, per season, or 300,000 units per year, or even more, who is this buyer? Who is the buyer? When you talk about affordability, you want to think about the Gikomba person, the Gikomba lady who is, you know, doing or collecting 1,000 shillings per day
from her Mutumba business.
You know, Karioko people.
We have Mama
Bogas in Kayole. Are they going to afford? Our biggest population is a poor majority.
Sure.
So if the poor people are not empowered to buy, this whole discussion of affordable housing may become a big lie. And that's why we end up saying there's so many houses that are not sold or not occupied because there is no market for them, or the market is so marginal. So that question of affordable housing is really deep.
Maybe one would want to throw in this kind of question, Mr. Kilonzo. We saw what happened in the US with mortgages.
Yes.
Prices were blown. And then it was, people were actually unable even to service some of the mortgages.
Exactly.
And today when we see in Kenya, is it really that costly, or is the developer trying to get quite a lot from their end?
It's two-edged. It's two-edged. I think for the past few years, we've seen developers come down on their, you know, slow down on the pricing. And it has not changed the uptake. It hasn't changed the uptake. So that tells you it is not so much about the price. It's so much about the availability of funding for the mortgages. How easy is it today to get a mortgage in Kenya? Because I still have a feeling supply of houses has not been, you know, a problem. There are developers and the government is coming in. The private sector has tried to move as much as possible. But the person buying does not have the ability. And I'll give you a scenario. Today, if you walk into a bank and you start application for a mortgage, what are you going to be faced with? You know, scrutiny of your income. Do you have a structured income? Are you bankable? And if all this is not possible, then they will tell you, sorry, we can't give you an offer, a mortgage. So that access to funding is critical and needs to be addressed as fast as possible. There has been so much shylocking in Kenya, you know, but shylocking cannot help by in a housing. Shylocking helps in people, you know, people to get quick funds to fix a few things here and there. You know, but why is it mushrooming so fast? It's because of the availability, the easy access to the shylocking fund. So if there could be an easy access to funding in Kenya, Kenyans can own property, can own affordable housing. The other thing is SACCOs. The support of SACCOs is very critical because, as I've told you, no matter how many units we build, if the person expected to buy is not able, we still have the challenge. So we need to address it from the side of the buyer more than the side of the supplier.
So for whom are we developing these units? That's supposed to be
fundamental
the first question.
Exactly.
So if you get the answer to that, then you can go ahead and do the developing.
We are good to go. Exactly.
Maybe I would just like you to paint a very simple scenario and explain in a very easy way. I like to tell people in a way that a 5-year-old can understand. Explain to me like you explain to a 5-year-old, because not everybody understands how the industry works.
Yes.
Take, for instance, someone who has an income of about 30,000 shillings or 25,000 shillings a month.
Yes.
What kind of an offer or a package can Urithi Housing give to this kind of an average Kenyan?
Awesome, and important to ask that. There are so many houses that we can offer. As Urithi, we've been able to offer houses as low as 1 million. All right. Actually, we even have a bed sitter that we started at 450,000, per unit. It's now selling at 850, but sold out. The people bought now are selling, and that is quite affordable. I mean, for anyone who could want, who might want to own a home.
Yes.
So we have so many, and again, what we did is we asked them to pay a deposit, and then we spread the payments over a longer period of time. And they've been able to own property.
For how long can the payment period stretch?
We give up to 12 months.
All right.
We give up to 12 months, depending on the life, of the life cycle of the project.
All right.
But again, and I would tell you honestly, because if you listen to the discussion going on in the market, is that there's so much fear on the off-plan, projects.
All right.
Why? Because there's no specific period of construction that they expect.
Sure.
But the question is, from which side are we getting the challenge? Again, from the side of the buyer. Because this person goes and takes a loan to pay you a deposit. Okay, he takes a loan to pay the deposit of the house. So the first deposit is a loan. Now he's servicing 2 loans.
Yes.
On this side, you're expecting him to pay for the house to continue growing. On the other side, he's expected to service a loan.
Sure.
So chances are high, and because the bank will bite hard if you don't, if you default, he will default on the side of the house. And you see, the model that we've been able to offer to the market is a very unique model, where we say, let's come together and build together. Let's come together and own together. Now that means Geoffrey, Mr. Mondi, and another person there, 10 people come together. We put our money and we start building. So Urithi is just a facilitator, not a developer. We just facilitate the building. So what happens is, if out of the 10 people, 5 default, or 5 are not able to service, the payments, definitely, and maybe the 5 have paid, this project will slow down. Why? It's a communal development, and that is what the challenge where the challenge has been. So you find so many projects that are not growing as fast because many people are not, paying up. The other question is, the 30,000 per month earner has other obligations. Are they able to service their other obligations? Even as they own a home. And you can tell from the economy currently that when the economy it has a challenge, many people stop servicing even loans with the banks. So if they are not servicing loans, the portfolio at risk in the bank grows higher. What about housing, where it's social? And we are doing so much social, not economical. So when you're doing social, everyone expects you to understand. Oh, please understand me. I'll pay next week. I'll pay next month, and it will never be paid. So those are the challenges that the affordable housing is facing.
But then, even as you say this, shouldn't there be a lobby for policies that make this, bring about this change? And maybe what's the private sector doing in terms of engaging the government to come up with measures that will allow? And is it what the private sector should do, or is it what the government should do? Many people are left wondering there. Who should speak for the common mwananchi? Because like you said, majority of Kenyans today are not up there. But then they all have this dream of owning a home. Then who should voice their concern? You guys are in business, of course,
Yes, definitely,
but
yes.
not just in business. You want to see to it that, people live in, habitable conditions and they live in good housing.
You know, the model that we are following, it's the Asian model
All right.
right now. And if you look at a place like Singapore, you want to ask yourself, were the citizens able to service their loans and payments? Yes, they were. When did they get the support? The government side. So if the government can support, because if today you're jobless, okay, so many companies are laying off.
Yes.
So many. The last 1 month, we've seen thousands of jobs. People losing jobs, including a company that just fired all of them. If that happens and someone is servicing a mortgage, someone is paying up for a house somewhere, and not just one, you can imagine out of the 1,000, a good majority
of them
were servicing something somewhere. So that means that's a default directly.
Yeah.
Where should the government step in? My opinion is the government needs to sit down with the private sector and ask ourselves, where are we failing? Is in the job provision. It's in self-employment.
Right.
Can we empower the youth? Can we empower the people that there's no one particular time you're stuck?
Yes.
Because when you're stuck, you had a job and you lose the job. When you're stuck, everything is stuck in your life,
Sure.
including the debtors. Including the debtors. So the support from the government should not just be on the provision.
All right.
And that's what I'm saying. The supply side is not so much in trouble. The demand side. And the government needs to address the demand side more. How empowered are the Kenyan citizens to own homes today? If that is the collaboration that the government is saying, private sector provide the houses, will give you the subsidies and tax-free importation of material,
waivers, and
but on
so
the other side, we'll get to them wananchi empowered to buy those houses.
That also allows the private sector to come down on their pricing because there's subsidy on the same.
Exactly. Actually now, this is the demand side.
Yes.
The other side on the government is the tax.
All right.
Because the cost of building today, you're supposed to pay so much tax. Actually, it's almost twice. You're supposed to pay the value added tax.
All right.
You have to pay on the material side, and then again when you come to the as a developer, you're paying tax. So you need to look at how do you make it affordable to supply a unit.
All right.
Because it's possible to supply a unit below 1 million, where the majority of the people are and can afford. But the question is, based on the material cost and tax, are you able to deliver this? Is the developer, the contractor is being taxed, the buyer is being taxed, the materials are being taxed. So the government has to come to a compromise.
So it's a multiple layer of taxation on the same unit.
Exactly.
Talking about construction material, something I want us to touch on now.
Yeah.
And this is a growing concern all over the world. We know that the issue of global warming is real. It's not an ops like one great or one leader of a big country said one time.
Yeah.
It's a reality. It is something that is here with us, and we
Yes.
cannot brush it aside or put it, sweep it under the carpet.
True that.
The construction industry in Kenya, are we doing anything to go to the more environmental friendly kind of construction in Kenya today? And maybe you can share with us, being in the industry yourself, what are some of the measures that are being put into place to make sure that, yes, we continue with our construction and our building as always, but at the same time, we are keen to see to it that the environment is not,
being depleted. It's a good question, and you want to ask again which areas, are we risking the environment? Number one is on the stones.
All right.
Because every day there are quarries that are being sunk every single day. And those quarries are never going to be habitable. The second thing is the sand.
All right.
We are harvesting sand every single day. The other day we were seeing sand harvesting at the coastal, region.
Yes.
And what happens to people sinking, getting sand from the seashore?
Yes.
That means the sand at the beaches, at the shore, will continue going back, eroding back to the sea. And sooner than later, you'll have no beaches to go and relax.
Definitely.
So there's so much risk, and there's so much need to adopt the new technology. These are the prefabricated houses. Materials, the polystyrene material that does not require so much sand, stone at the end point. But again, it's a challenge we would want to throw to the Kenyans to accept this technology, because acceptance has become a problem. And this is informed, by culture, beliefs, and backgrounds.
Nyumba ni mawe na mchanga.
That's a problem. Mortar. If it's not stone and mortar, brick and mortar, then it's not house.
Juu lazima roofing we put.
They even want to knock, on the wall, and is it stone? So we have improved so much. The world has moved to new technology, and we need to move as well. And the faster we do it, the better. But you see, again, we need to deal with cartels of the suppliers of these stones and the sand and all that, so that once that is dealt with, we are now able to get this done. Because today, if you're doing an apartment, there's no single reason you should do stone, brick and mortar. You can do modern technology. It will still be stronger. It is stable. It is secure. Number two is a gated community, embracing gated communities. Because again, the fear of insecurity is when you have a standalone somewhere, all alone in the midst of nowhere. And then, people come, they will even drill through your wall and they'll find you. But if we embrace the gated communities where the private sector and government is coming, then it will be easy to use technology, because there's shared security, and that is very important. The other thing is also apartments, adopting to apartments. It's okay to live on that floor. It's okay to live on fourth floor. In China, in these places, they have places where people live on 100th floor. And they're okay.
40 stories apartments.
Exactly. So we need to move to that level where we understand home ownership is not just a plot, a house with a gate. You can be on that floor and comfortable. Now,
still on that, embracing technology.
Yes.
We've got things like, you're talking about gated communities.
Yes.
And of course, when you do these gated communities, we have pavements and so on and so forth. In the houses, we have the finishings. We've got, tiles in our bathrooms and our kitchens, and even in the living rooms. Wooden tiles are very good, but again, the whole idea of chopping wood for making these, it's also depleting the environment at the same time.
Exactly.
But then, what do you make of, because I was reading somewhere and I realized that in countries like Germany, in Europe, especially in Europe, it's a growing trend where contractors are actually going back to the recycling industry and are recycling plastic to make pavements, pavement tiles, pavements, to make floor tiles, to make roofing tiles, and so on and so forth. Is Kenya going towards that? Are we embracing that?
Slowly, and not as fast as we should. And this one needs to have a very strong support, and especially because the innovation that we're talking about, the support of innovation. If a company starts such an idea, it needs to be supported, and because we want to ask, what is the cost of production in Kenya of such things? Recycling is possible, but again, our cost of production makes material locally expensive.
Very expensive.
And we are falling back to China, falling back to importation. Why? Because the local industries are not well supported. Right? So that idea is very good. But I can tell you, many starts, they have a good idea. They can do it. They can recycle and supply, but they have met with a very high cost of production. So we need to. That is a point we need to address.
I mean, what sense does it make for one to import recycled material, that is maybe say, for instance, floor tiles or roofing tiles from China, And yet in Kenya, still we have drainages clogged with tons, millions of tons of plastic that can actually make this much more easier. Clean the environment, but at the same time, subsidize the cost of construction.
Exactly. Truly, it's a challenge to the government. We need to support the production industry, and especially the light industry, because it's not that the innovation is not there. Young people, so many Kenyans are doing these things, but at a very low scale, a small scale. So if they can support, because the problem is, Mr. Mondi, I'll come to you for supply. You supply me tiles for one house, but I'm doing 100 houses. So will you sustain it? So it's not sustainable.
Well, Dennis from Syokimau is asking, I think he didn't get this earlier, he's asking, what's the cheapest house I can get with the help of at Urithi Housing?
All right, currently we have projects that are going for, we have sold out so many of the projects, but we had at 850, 1 million, 1.5, 1.6 million house at Joska. There's an apartment.
At Joska?
At Joska, an apartment. There are still other houses that are on sale. Like we have 150 units, which is sold out, but you can still, many people buy and they're selling. And you can also get a unit or two available in Juja, you know, at 3.5. Million house. That's a 3-bedroom. So Joska, we have apartments. In Juja, we have 3 bedrooms. We have sold out 2 units. But if you book now, you can always get a unit available. Because people buy and sometimes they release back because they're not able to continue paying. And when they release back, then you have an opportunity to buy again. So you can get a house. You can get plots, you know, buy a plot and build. But you can get a house or plot at the same time. You can also buy a plot for speculation. You know, far off from Nairobi, Nanyuki, that's Muruti. We have Mombasa, we have Nakuru. We are spread across 14 counties now. You can go to Nakuru, you can go to Embu, there is Nyeri, we are in Eldoret, Mombasa. We cut across Machakos, Kisumu. Kisumu, we are yet to come. We are coming to Kisumu. Yes.
Last time the chairman was here, someone from Kisumu was asking how to, if you guys are doing units.
Well, we are not in Kisumu.
You should go there.
Yes, we should go
I think the port is, the government is now opening. I think the first phase, this week, the president is in, together with the other leaders from the lake region, are meeting in Kisumu to open up the new port. So that means that area. It's an opening.
To be honest, it will open up that region, and sure, it's a good place to be.
Let's talk a little bit about commercial real estate. You know, we are more focused mainly as Kenyans because I think it's our dream to own a house. But then there's also the other issue of commercial real estate. You know, offices, shops, malls, and so on and so forth. How is that doing generally in Kenya today?
You know, it's a good market, to be honest. In Westlands, Upper Hill is doing quite well. You know, building, we've seen high-rise buildings coming up. You know, for people to own offices. But we've seen an influx in the malls, and I think those that are invested in malls are not very happy. Because the demand was there, but the demand was, you know, for a very small population. So there are many malls that are empty, and then Kenyans again are still, you know, clocked in the culture of stepping into the next kiosk and buy Skuma Wiki, step into the next kiosk and buy this. So the malls are very good market. Dubai is doing a fantastic, you know, job on that. But we are not moving as fast towards that direction. Because how many people can afford to buy an office? Many people rent. Number two, it is also about the empowerment. We have more Juakali industry in Kenya than we have, you know, these professionals that can buy an office space. So these guys will never buy an office space.
They just need somewhere to work.
Street hawking, all this. So it's about a population that is not there yet.
All right.
So in every project we do, we have a commercial project, a part of it. We have shops, we have supermarkets, we have banking halls and all that. So there's that market, but it's not as much. We only offer roughly 10%, actually 5 to 10% of the whole project to commercial. Yeah.
Now, maybe as we finish, because time also is not very much on our side, but
yes.
Finally,
yes,
if we look at the situation in Kenya right now, the possibility of owning a house for a common mwananchi is something that really needs to be worked on, following from the discussion that we had and the facts that you laid on the table.
Yes.
Maybe if you just give your own opinion, because some of the issues, I'm receiving this information that a lady called Margaret, I think from Embu, is asking and is concerned about the cost of electricity and water, especially when it comes to owning a home.
Yes.
How do you go about this generally? Because I know of a friend, who bought a property, an apartment. Sorry, won't mention where and which project, but
yes.
Again, when it comes to the issue of electricity and water,
yeah,
it's too costly.
Be connected becomes crazy. Yeah?
Why is this so?
Yeah, it's a challenge, and especially if you're doing it on a standalone house, where maybe you are a distant from the next transformer, then you have to pull, you have to get several poles. It's costly. And that is, I like what the government was doing, and is still doing, I guess, that getting electricity to every homestead is really critical, especially Nairobi and its, the environments, the peri-urbans locations. So it's important, but the cost, how do you determine who pays what? I would imagine a situation where if my house costs 8 million, 10 million, my cost of connection is not like someone who is doing a bad house.
Sure.
That is where I imagine the government should come in, so that you say, if your house is this amount, pay more to take care of the person who can't pay that much. But when you charge everybody the same, then that's where we go wrong. And that's why we have to mind the population.
There's a lady who is asking, I didn't quite get the name, but she's asking, is it possible for me to get a design, for Urithi to design a house for me as per my own requirements?
Beautiful.
Like a tailored design for my own housing.
Indeed, indeed. And what you have done now is, if you have a plot, because so many people again bought plots, and telling them abandon your plot and come and buy a house may not be possible. So we're saying, if you have a plot, you can come to our offices. We will give you a package where there's a designed house. You can choose the type that you want, the size that you want, and then we'll cost it for you. We'll say, this, we will have our professionals come to your plot, tell you this how much it will cost to build this house here. And then we'll also guide you on getting professionals to walk through with you. And there are many people, 28,000 members, a good number of bought plots, and that way we have to come up with that solution. So Yuri Homes is a solution for people to be built on their own plots, not necessarily coming to buy. Exactly. Yeah.
That's an amazing initiative. Now, probably we have less than 5 minutes to go in this. Finally, if you look at the industry, at the real estate industry in Kenya, where do you place us 5 years to come? Because, I don't know, but I don't have facts to this, but we are waiting for the census to tell us. But I'm pretty sure that the population in Kenya is growing at a very fast rate.
Very fast. We were at 50. I hope I hope you're not hitting 70.
Could be, probably.
Maybe we're hitting 70.
Yeah, because
or more.
we've done the number 50 because the last census was taken in 9 years ago. So probably 9 years ago, it's not a short
Could
time.
hit 70, I'm not sure. But yes, you're saying that every single day, demand goes high. Yeah. And if there's no radical, uninterruptive, radical, change into this, how we're doing it, we may be hit so hard by the demand. And the collaboration between the government and the private sector is very important. I want to applaud the government, or this government, because they have opened up to the private sector. Yes. They have invited the private sector to discuss this matter because it's critical. Sure. You cannot talk about many other things without addressing the core, the basics, which are clothing, cloth, food, and shelter. If this collaboration continues, then we are going to be better. 5 years, 10 years to come. The problem we may have is our political, change of political regimes, where another regime comes and then all what has been started, and then we go around in round circles. So if we continue the way we are going, there's hope. And I want to say there's hope. Sure. Because the government is now talking about the KMRC, which is a remortgaging company that will help to facilitate affordable mortgages. And on the other side, supporting the private sector to deliver affordable homes. So the marriage of the two will actually take us into a better place in the next 5 years. Sure. If it's not politicized.
If it's not politicized, of course.
And corrupted.
Quite a challenge, I would say. But thankfully, I would say that we've seen with the Building Bridges initiative and the handshake and so on and so forth. Exactly. We've seen that the opposition is actually able to work together with the government in development issues, leave alone the political side of it. It's marred with a lot of maneno hapa na pale.
And actually we need to, and it's important you say that, we need to separate politics and development. Sure. The time we do that, we'll move.
We'll move forward. Yeah.
Political wing, let it remain political. Fight where you want to fight, but let delivery be delivery. Let there be delivery. If we go that direction, we are good to go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Geoffrey Kilonzo, General Manager at Urithi Housing Corporation Limited. Of course, as we mentioned earlier, Urithi Housing provides affordable quality housing and land at subsidized cost per unit to cover about 28,000 registered members. And that's not a small number. Thank you very much for the good job that you guys are doing. Asante. And thank you also for honoring our invitation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, always.
Karibu sana viewer. We have come to the end of this segment, but don't touch that dial. We take a short break now. When we come back, my colleague John Ngige will be standing in today for Kevin Nyariki on the Morning Sports Extra. Bye-bye for now, and see you again tomorrow, God willing. My name is Timothy Omundi. Bye-bye for now.
Everywhere.